The mountain lion's eyes locked with Russell's, a blazing amber against the deepening crimson of its matted fur. Blood pooled beneath the magnificent creature, its powerful body trembling with each laboured breath as steel wires cut deeper into its flesh. Russell Thompson clutched his bolt cutters, frozen in that fragile moment between courage and caution. One wrong move, and those massive jaws could end him. The autumn wind whipped through the remote clearing, carrying the metallic scent of blood across his face. His hands shook, not from the biting cold, but from the haunting memory of the bear cub he'd failed to save 3 years ago. The same helpless rage burned in his chest now as he studied the illegal trap. Someone would pay for this cruelty, but first, this majestic animal had to survive. Hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. Now, let's continue with the story. The early October sun filtered through golden aspen leaves in Yellowstone National Park, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor. Russell had started his patrol before dawn, his weathered Jeep Wrangler bouncing along remote service roads in the northern section. At 42, the conservation officer knew every hidden corner of the park, preferred the company of wildlife to most humans, and carried the weight of his past in the deep lines around his eyes. "Base to Russell, checking your 20, crackled his radio. Russell grabbed the handset. "Northern Quadrant, Section 7. Checking reports of possible illegal activity. Copy that. Resort developers are touring the boundary area today with the county commissioner. Keep clear if possible." He scowled. The proposed luxury resort at the park's edge had been a source of tension for months. "Understood," he replied flatly, though his jaw tightened at the thought. Parking in a grove of pines, Russell continued on foot, scanning the ground for signs of disturbance. 15 years as a conservation officer had honed his senses. Something about the way the fallen leaves settled in one particular spot caught his attention. Too deliberate, too clean. Crouching down, he brushed away the camouflage to reveal what he feared. A well-hidden anchor point for a trap line. Following the nearly invisible trail, Russell spotted the first drop of blood, then another. His pulse quickened as he tracked the crimson breadcrumbs through thickening underbrush. The blood spatters grew larger, more frequent, leading him to a small clearing where he finally saw it. A magnificent male mountain lion, its tawny coat now slick with blood, ensnared in a vicious wire trap. The animal growled weakly as Russell approached, defiant even in its vulnerable state. Most conservation officers would call for backup, but Russell knew every minute counted. He slowly removed his pack, never breaking eye contact with the wounded predator. "Easy there," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm not here to hurt you." As he inched closer, Russell noticed a distinctive white marking on the lion's right ear, a perfect crescent moon shape. His breath caught in his throat. He'd seen that marking before, in a faded photograph hanging in his father's hunting cabin. 30 years ago, his father had shot a female mountain lion with that exact same marking. Could this possibly be her offspring? The coincidence sent a chill down his spine. Russell had become a conservation officer partly to atone for his father's hunting legacy. They hadn't spoken in years, their relationship severed when Russell chose protection over pursuit. Now fate had placed this lion, possibly connected to his past, directly in his path. Pushing the thought aside, Russell focused on the task at hand. The trap was sophisticated, designed to tighten as the animal struggled. The mountain lion had clearly fought hard, causing the steel wires to cut deeply into its shoulder and back. With steady hands, Russell prepared a sedative dart, knowing he couldn't safely free the animal while it remained conscious. "This will help," he murmured, administering the shot with practiced precision. As the sedative took effect, The mountain lion's eyes, brilliant amber flecked with gold, held Russell's gaze with unexpected intelligence. There was no fear there, only a dignified resignation that struck Russell to his core. Working quickly, once the animal was sedated, Russell cut through the vicious wires one by one. He recognized the trapping technique, the signature of Martin Blackwood's poaching ring, active despite multiple arrests. The evidence would be valuable, but saving this creature took priority. When the last wire fell away, Russell carefully cleaned and treated the wounds, applying antibiotic ointment and bandages where possible. Through it all, the mountain lion remained eerily still, its shallow breathing the only sign of life. "I'm calling you Aspen," Russell said softly, glancing at the golden trees surrounding them. "Seems fitting." As the sedative began to wear off, Russell backed away to a safe distance. Slowly, painfully, Aspen struggled to his feet, staggering slightly before finding his balance. For a long moment, the mountain lion stood motionless, regarding Russell with an unreadable expression. Then, with surprising grace for his injured state, Aspen turned and limped into the forest, but not before looking back once, his amber eyes meeting Russell's in silent acknowledgement. Back at his cabin that evening, Russell filed his report about the illegal trap, including photographs and GPS coordinates. He couldn't shake the image of that white crescent marking, nor the strange sense of connection he'd felt with the wounded predator. Standing on his porch as twilight descended over the mountains, Russell heard a distant cry echo across the valley, the unmistakable call of a mountain lion. Something told him their paths would cross again. He just never imagined how profoundly that encounter would change his life. 4 weeks had passed since Russell Thompson's encounter with the injured mountain lion. November had painted Yellowstone in russet and amber, the park quieting as tourists dwindled with the approaching winter. Russell's daily patrols continued, but something had changed. Twice now, he'd spotted distinctive paw prints shadowing his own boot tracks. Once, he glimpsed a tawny shape disappearing into the underbrush when he turned suddenly on the trail. Today, parked at Eagle Point Overlook, Russell lowered his binoculars and smiled. There, on the ridge opposite, the mountain lion he'd named Aspen sat watching him, its wounds healed, but for a visible scar across its shoulder. The animal made no attempt to hide. Instead, it seemed to be deliberately letting Russell know it was there. "I see our ghost cat has appointed himself your guardian," said a voice behind him. Russell turned to find Lillian White Eagle, a respected Shoshone elder of 79, standing beside his jeep. Her silver hair was pulled back in a traditional braid, her eyes bright with wisdom accumulated over decades in these mountains. "Ghost cat?" Russell asked. Lillian nodded, climbing with surprising agility onto the passenger seat. "That's what our people call them. Mountain lions choose their humans, not the other way around. Your paths have crossed for a reason." Before Russell could respond, his radio crackled with Eleanor Reynolds' voice. "Russell, we need you back at headquarters. Town hall meeting's been moved up. Howard Green just arrived with the county commissioners." Lillian's expression darkened. "That man brings shadows with him." The conservation office buzzed with tension when Russell arrived. Eleanor Reynolds, the park's education director, was organizing stacks of environmental impact reports, her reading glasses perched on her nose. At 58, she commanded respect throughout the community, her widow's grief having transformed into fierce advocacy for the wilderness she and her late husband had both loved. "They're pushing for fast-track approval," Eleanor said without preamble. Her eyes met Russell's with the familiar spark that still flickered between them, despite the personal distance of recent years. "Howard claims the resort will bring 300 jobs to the county." "At what cost?" Russell countered, accepting the coffee she handed him. Black, the way he'd always taken it. Their fingers brushed, a momentary connection neither acknowledged. The town hall erupted into heated debate that evening. Howard Green, silver-haired and immaculately dressed, spoke of economic opportunity with practiced charm. But Russell noticed how the developer's smile never reached his eyes when addressing environmental concerns. "Conservation is admirable," Howard said smoothly, "but people need livelihoods. Surely we can balance both." From her seat beside Russell, Eleanor whispered, "There's no balance when it comes to profit margins." As they left the meeting, Russell spotted Martin Blackwood watching from across the parking lot. The former ranger's weathered face hardened upon seeing Russell. Then he slipped into a black pickup and disappeared into the night. The following morning, Russell's patrol took him to the North Ridge. Following a hunch, he parked and hiked to a secluded lookout. Sure enough, fresh tracks indicated someone had been watching the proposed resort site, and judging by the cigarette butts bearing Martin's preferred brand, it wasn't wildlife enthusiasts. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Eleanor's voice startled him as she emerged from the trail. "Not with Martin back in the area." "I'm not alone," Russell replied, nodding toward a distant outcropping where Aspen sat observing them. "He's been following me for weeks now." Eleanor's expression softened. "I've heard the rangers talking. They say whenever you're on patrol, that mountain lion isn't far behind." The news of Russell's unusual shadow had spread throughout the park staff. Some visitors had even captured photos of Aspen trailing Russell's jeep from a distance, the images going viral with headlines about the guardian lion of Yellowstone. Later that afternoon, Russell and Eleanor met Lillian at her modest home on the reservation. The walls were adorned with traditional artwork depicting the sacred relationship between the Shoshone and the natural world. "My grandfather had a wolf that followed him this way," Lillian told them, pouring herbal tea. "In 1934, during the hardest winter anyone remembered, he saved the wolf from a trap, much like you saved your mountain lion." "He's not my mountain lion," Russell protested. Lillian's knowing smile suggested otherwise. "The wolf warned my grandfather of danger many times. These bonds are sacred. The animal has chosen you as kin." As if to confirm Lillian's words, Russell discovered something remarkable the next day: a freshly killed deer placed deliberately beside his usual lunch spot at Mirror Lake. Aspen watched from across the water as Russell examined the offering, then slipped away into the forest. That evening, Eleanor visited Russell's cabin, the first time she'd done so since their relationship had cooled years before. Standing on his porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, she finally asked the question that had lingered between them. "What happened to us, Russell?" "I couldn't save them," he said quietly, the ghost of old pain in his voice. "The mother bear and her cub. I was too late. After that, I couldn't bear the thought of failing someone else I cared about." Eleanor's hand found his, warm and certain. "You never failed me. You just stopped letting me in." Their conversation continued into the night, wounds beginning to heal like the scars on Aspen's shoulder. Neither noticed the mountain lion watching from the tree line, a silent sentinel guarding against dangers yet to come. December descended on Yellowstone with merciless intensity. Snow blanketed the landscape in pristine white, temperatures plummeted to negative digits, and the skeleton crew of winter staff moved with the quiet efficiency of those accustomed to nature's harshest season. In the visitor center, a modest Christmas tree adorned with handcrafted ornaments stood in stark contrast to the emergency weather alerts scrolling across the digital display board. Russell Thompson studied the approaching storm system on the radar, his expression grim. "Blizzard conditions within 12 hours, he informed Eleanor, who was coordinating with park rangers via radio. "Wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour, temperatures dropping to -20. "Perfect timing," Eleanor replied grimly. "We've got a family of 5 who haven't checked in from their snowshoe trek to Obsidian Falls." From his position by the window, Frank Sullivan grunted in agreement. At 75, the retired Vietnam veteran volunteered as a fire spotter and emergency coordinator, his weathered face a map of experience. Weather Service just upgraded to a severe warning. This isn't a storm to mess with. Russell nodded, already pulling on his heavy-duty winter gear. I'll take the eastern approach. Have Jenkins cover the main trail. I'm coming with you, Eleanor insisted, grabbing her medical kit. They might need immediate attention. Their eyes met, mutual concern for the missing family overriding personal caution. The connection between them had strengthened since their conversation on Russell's porch, but neither had found time to explore what it might mean. Now wasn't the moment, not with lives at stake. 20 miles away, on a ridgeline overlooking the park's northern boundary, Martin Blackwood lowered his binoculars and turned to his two associates. Thompson's heading out, he informed them, checking the ammunition in his rifle. Perfect timing. At 55, Martin's face bore the hardened look of a man who'd made difficult choices. Once a respected ranger himself, he'd been fired for misconduct years ago, forcing him into the lucrative but dangerous poaching business. The money kept his sister's family housed after her husband's death and paid medical bills for his aging mother. Green wants this area cleared of predators before the development plans go public, he reminded his men. The mountain lion is priority one. If Thompson gets in the way... He trailed off, the implication clear. What began as a rescue mission deteriorated rapidly as the storm intensified. Russell and Eleanor located the family, cold and frightened but alive, in a sheltered ravine after their 8-year-old son had twisted his ankle. Loading everyone into their emergency snow vehicle, they made for Frank's fire lookout, the nearest safe haven. Something feels wrong, Russell muttered as they navigated through near whiteout conditions. The vehicle's headlights barely penetrated the swirling snow. Eleanor glanced at him from where she was checking the boy's ankle. Beyond the obvious blizzard? Before Russell could answer, the ground shuddered beneath them. The vehicle rocked violently as a 4.2 magnitude earthquake, not uncommon in Yellowstone's geologically active terrain, sent tremors through the landscape. Nearby, the crack of splitting wood echoed as an ancient pine toppled across the trail ahead. "Everyone okay?" Russell called out, receiving shaky affirmatives from the frightened family. With the main route blocked, they were forced to detour through a narrow canyon. Working together, Russell and Eleanor delivered the family safely to Frank's lookout tower, but as they prepared to leave, the mother clutched Russell's arm. "Daisy," she said desperately, "my son's service dog. She got scared during the earthquake and ran off." "Please, she's family." Russell exchanged glances with Eleanor. "Get these people warm. I'll find the dog." "I'm coming with—" Eleanor began, but Russell cut her off. "You're needed here. Frank's radio is out, and someone has to coordinate with base." He squeezed her hand. "I'll be fine." Famous last words, Russell thought an hour later as he trudged through knee-deep snow, calling for the missing golden retriever. A bark in the distance gave him hope, but as he rounded a granite outcropping, he found himself staring down the barrel of Martin Blackwood's rifle. "Perfect timing, Thompson," Martin said, echoing his earlier words to his associates. 2 other men emerged from the blizzard, flanking him. "Martin," Russell acknowledged, keeping his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "Didn't figure you for stupid enough to poach during a blizzard." "Not poaching today," Martin replied, clearing. "Green's orders. That mountain lion you've been playing pet with is bad for business." "So you're an errand boy for developers now?" Russell's contempt was palpable. "How far you've fallen!" Anger flashed in Martin's eyes. "You don't know anything about me, what I've had to do to keep my family afloat." "There are always choices, Martin." Whatever response Martin might have given was cut short by a violent aftershock. The ground lurched beneath them as another tremor shook the canyon. Russell lunged forward, knocking Martin's rifle aside, but in the confusion, The butt of the weapon connected with his temple. Pain exploded behind his eyes as he stumbled backward. Something massive crashed nearby. The aftershock had dislodged a dead tree. Russell tried to dodge, but his boot caught on a hidden root. He fell hard, and the massive trunk pinned his lower body against the snow-covered ground. Martin regained his footing, retrieved his rifle, and approached Russell with cold determination. "Nothing personal," he said, raising the weapon. "Just business." A piercing screech cut through the howling wind, a sound that raised the hair on the back of every man's neck. From the swirling snow emerged a tawny blur of muscle and fury. Aspen launched into the clearing. A ghost materialized from the storm, directly at Martin. The poacher fired wildly, the shot going wide as nearly 200 pounds of mountain lion collided with him. Martin's companions fled in terror as man and predator tumbled in a violent struggle. Russell, trapped and fading from consciousness, witnessed the battle through dimming vision. Aspen fought with calculated precision, not killing but driving Martin back, standing guard over Russell's pinned form. Blood streaming from deep claw marks across his chest, Martin finally staggered away into the blizzard, leaving his rifle behind in the snow. Aspen approached Russell cautiously, intelligent eyes assessing the trapped man's condition. The mountain lion circled once, then settled his warm body against Russell's, sheltering him from the worst of the storm. As consciousness slipped away, Russell thought he saw two ghostly figures in the swirling snow, his estranged father and the female mountain lion from the old photograph, watching over them both. Then darkness claimed him. The last sensation, the rhythmic breathing of the predator who had become protector. The April sun bathed Yellowstone in gentle warmth, melting the last patches of stubborn snow and coaxing dormant life from winter's grip. Russell Thompson stood on his cabin porch, breathing deeply of pine-scented air as he tested his newly healed leg. 3 months had passed since the blizzard, 3 months of recovery and reflection. "Doctor says you shouldn't push it," Eleanor called from the doorway, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Russell accepted one with a grateful smile. At his side, a golden retriever named Daisy leaned affectionately against his leg. The service dog he'd gone searching for that fateful night had become his constant companion during recovery. "I've been sitting around long enough," he replied, though without his usual impatience. The ordeal had changed him, softened the harder edges of his nature. "They're expecting us at headquarters by noon." The headquarters building had been transformed with banners celebrating Yellowstone's 150th anniversary. Park staff bustled about, preparing for the weekend's festivities. Frank Sullivan, looking distinguished in a pressed ranger uniform he hadn't worn in decades, waved them over. "There he is, our man of the hour," Frank called, clapping Russell on the shoulder. "How's the leg?" "Getting there," Russell replied. "Any word about our friend?" Frank's expression turned serious. "No confirmed sightings in 2 months." "But Diana thinks he's still out there." Dr. Diana Chen, a wildlife behaviorist from the University of Montana, had arrived in January after hearing about Russell and Aspen's remarkable relationship. The elegant 62-year-old scientist had established a research project combining modern tracking methods with Lillian White Eagle's traditional knowledge. "The cameras caught something last week at Eagle Point," Diana informed them as she approached, tablet in hand. "Too brief for a positive ID, but it moved like him." Russell nodded, hiding his disappointment. Since regaining consciousness in the hospital, found by Frank's search party after Aspen's distinctive roars led them through the blizzard, he had wondered about the mountain lion's fate. The animal had disappeared after saving his life, leaving only bloodied paw prints in the snow. "Martin swears he wounded him badly," Russell said quietly. Eleanor's hand found his, squeezing gently. "Aspen's smart. He knows when to hide." The mention of Martin Blackwood stirred mixed emotions. The poacher had been caught seeking medical attention for his injuries. subsequently revealing Howard Green's illegal activities under a plea deal. But during his community service at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, an alternative sentence Russell had advocated for, Martin had shown surprising dedication and regret. After the meeting adjourned, Russell drove to a secluded overlook deep in the park. This had become his ritual every Saturday since being cleared for limited duty, bringing a fresh deer haunch acquired from local road kills, leaving it at the spot where he had first rescued Aspen. Thus far, the offerings had remained untouched. As Russell placed today's offering on the sun-warmed rock, Eleanor waited in the jeep, understanding his need for this private moment. He stood silently, scanning the surrounding forest, then sighed and turned to leave. A twig snapped in the underbrush. Russell froze, hardly daring to breathe. From between two ancient pines emerged a familiar tawny form, leaner than before, but unmistakable. The white crescent marking on his ear caught the sunlight as Aspen stepped cautiously into the clearing. Their eyes met across the distance, amber against blue, the same connection that had formed months ago when Russell had cut away the cruel wires. The mountain lion bore new scars across his flank, testament to his battle with Martin, but moved with the same fluid grace. "You're alive," Russell whispered, emotion thickening his voice. Aspen approached the deer haunch, sniffed it cautiously, then looked up at Russell again. In a gesture that took Russell's breath away, the mountain lion deliberately pushed the offering a few inches toward him before taking it, a sharing, not just accepting. From the jeep, Eleanor watched through binoculars, tears streaming down her face at witnessing this reunion. Behind her, Diana quietly operated a long-range camera, documenting the extraordinary interaction for her groundbreaking study on cross-species relationships. 2 days later, Yellowstone's anniversary celebration became something more profound. The central ceremony took place at sunset, with hundreds gathered at the grand prismatic overlook. Standing at the podium beside Eleanor, Lillian, Frank, and Diana, Russell addressed the crowd. 150 years ago, this land became the world's first national park, he began. But the relationship between humans and this wilderness goes back thousands of years. The Shoshone people have always known what we're only beginning to understand, that we are not separate from nature, but bound to it in ways beyond our comprehension. As Russell spoke, Lillian stepped forward, her silver hair crowned with a traditional beaded headband. My people tell the story of Ghost Cat, who chooses a human guardian when the spirits recognize kindred souls across different forms, she said. What happened here this winter was not miraculous, but natural, the way things were always meant to be between the two-legged and the four-legged nations. The ceremony concluded with the announcement of the newly established Aspen's Ridge Wildlife Corridor, land originally slated for resort development, now permanently protected through a conservation trust. Howard Green's assets, seized after his conviction for environmental crimes and conspiracy, had partially funded the acquisition. As twilight deepened into night, a small group gathered at Eagle Point Overlook. Russell and Eleanor, Frank, Lillian, Diana, and surprisingly, Martin Blackwood, his community service extended by his own request. I spent years taking from this land, Martin said quietly. Now I'm learning how to give back. Frank nodded approval, then gazed toward the distant mountains. You know, when I was in Vietnam, an old villager told me every living thing is connected by invisible threads. Pull one thread and everything feels it. The web of life, Lillian agreed. Our actions create ripples that touch shores we cannot see. As conversation flowed between generations, Eleanor slipped her hand into Russell's. We're getting married in July, she announced to the group. Right here at this spot. Congratulations filled the air, but Russell's attention had shifted to a familiar outcropping where a distinctive silhouette sat perfectly still against the darkening sky. Aspen watched them from his rocky perch, as he had so many times before. "Our guardian approves," Russell said softly to Eleanor. As they departed in the gathering darkness, Russell paused to look back one final time. Aspen remained, a silent sentinel against the star-filled sky. Their paths had crossed through violence and healing, creating a bond that transcended the boundaries between species. In the soft earth of the trail, paw prints appeared alongside human footprints, separate yet parallel, two journeys intertwined by fate and compassion, continuing forward into the gathering night. I hope you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss touching stories. Leave a like and then comment below what you thought of the emotional stories. See you in the next video.